show of hands, how many of you here had a career unit in school? Can't see very well. Maybe some of you? I did too. Mine was in 4th grade, Mrs. Sheedy's class. She had us choose a profession we wanted to do when we were adults. I came up blank. I have a pretty vivid memory of saying, I don't know, and her not being very happy about that. But I thought it was kind of weird to have my life all figured out when I was 9 anyway. When I was a kid, all I cared about was tiny things. My Barbies, my stamp collection, doll houses, miniatures, anything with a label. If it was small, it was for me. It's honestly the overarching theme of my life. Pretty early on, though, I kind of figured I could never make that passion of mine into a career. Okay, more audience participation. I want you to take a moment and think about what it is you loved doing when you were a kid. And it doesn't have to be job-related. Maybe when you were 6, your parents bought a computer. You took to it immediately. And now, you're the senior programmer of a website development company. Or maybe, when you were not much more than 4, you insisted on wearing your dress to the bus stop, even if it meant wearing that dress under your snowsuit. And now, you're the creative director of a mobile lifestyle boutique. I've had a theory for a while now that the things we loved as kids are important and may have a hand in how we determine our own career paths. There's not much online, but I did find a study talking about job satisfaction among those surveyed who are actually fulfilling the dream jobs of their childhoods, and that rate is something like 88%. I'm actually not surprised by this. But up until about 9 years ago, I never had a career goal ever. I mean, I did what you were supposed to do, right? I went to college, I graduated, I got a job in my field, and after that, I kind of just went with the flow. I never felt compelled to do anything. I was perfectly content to work jobs that required tasks like filing or data entry, and I loved that I didn't have to think about my job when I left for the end of the day. I had great friends, a wonderful family, and I was having a total blast, so how could there be any more than that? All the while, though, in my leisure time, I was still focusing on making things in miniature. In my early adulthood, that meant needlepoint. Sometimes I would work on 48-count silk gauze, and for you non-embroiderers out there, that means there are 48 holes to the inch, or 3,204 holes to the square inch. That's pretty tiny. In 1996, I moved here to TEDxFondduLac from Green Bay, and I didn't have a job at first, so I spent my days happily embroidering for a while. Sometimes I would daydream about how cool it would be to actually make that into a job, but I figured that job never existed, so I kind of put it out of my head. And eventually I did find a job I really liked, finance clerk at our local paper. The newspaper was located downtown in those days, which was great because there were a lot of cafes around, and I could go on my break and read for a half hour or so. Sometimes I would actually go across the street and pick up a magazine or two at our local bookstore. And in August of 2006, I picked up this magazine, Cloth, Paper, Scissors. I had never heard of it before, but I loved it. There were a lot of really neat mixed media projects I wanted to try, but the most intriguing one for me went by only 3 letters, A, T, and C. Unfortunately, the magazine never told me what those letters meant, so I had to go online and do a little sleuthing. And at first, all I could come up with was information about air traffic controllers. Kind of figured that wasn't it, so I dug a little deeper and realized what they probably meant was artist trading cards. Artist trading cards is actually an art movement that began in 1996 with an artist named Vancy Sterneman in Zurich. He had a gallery exhibit there, and he made 1,000 of these little cards, which only measure 2.5 by 3.5 inches, right up my alley. And what he did was he had those cards out, and he invited people to take one and then make one of their own and bring it back and essentially trade with him. These cards are always traded, never sold. That's a tenet of ATC's. I thought this was the coolest idea I had ever heard, and I had to be a part of it. So soon, I was actually making those cards myself with collage elements, like those stamps, labels, and miniatures I talked about before. and I began trading online with people from all over the world. This is actually one of my binders, of which I have like 3 full. It was so great. One of the people I met along the way was a woman named Carolyn Brady.
Hi, TEDxFondduLac.
Hi, Carolyn Brady. Carolyn lived right in the Milwaukee area and was looking to get a live ATC trade going. With a live trade, you make cards like normal, but instead of trading with people online, you are trading in real life. I loved this idea, so when she formed the group, of course I joined, happily, and I'm very happy to say that I'm the charter member of this group that still meets monthly and is still going strong after 11 years. At this point, I am having the same feelings about my art as you might feel when you're in love. You know those feelings where you can't get enough of it? And you start daydreaming about all the amazing adventures you and your art can take together? I was obsessed. As far as feeling fulfilled in work, I had never felt this way before in my life. I never thought it was possible to feel like this except for love for another human being. I would get so into my art making that I called it the zone. And if any of you are artists out there, I just winked at my friend Anush. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You are so engaged in your work that time passes ridiculously fast, and the creating is pure joy. Nothing else matters in that moment. And all the while, I still loved my real job, but it's the late aughts at this point and the beginning of the Great Recession. Layoffs were a quarterly thing at the newspaper all of a sudden, and in December of 2008, my only other coworker in the finance department was let go. So now it's just me. And we're in the middle of a merger, and there are some redundancies. Needless to say, I got nervous. So my husband Brian and I decided that we would save my entire paycheck each pay period just to see what would happen if I lost my job and to see if we could live on what Brian made alone. Turns out this experiment couldn't have happened at a better time, because about a year later, I made this card. I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. And I thought it would be fun to make a card commemorating it. By this point, I had made over 800 ATCs. I told you I was obsessed. And I was posting them all on Flickr before I traded them. And one of the people who saw this card was a woman named Pam Kieber, who owns a website that is wholly specialized in mid-century modern furnishings in homes. She thought the card would be a great fit for her website, so she asked permission to use it. Of course, I said I'd be honored. And I have to tell you, seeing my own work on someone else's website that they actually asked to use, that was a turning point for me, for sure. About 6 weeks after this, I got an email from Pam. She wanted me to give her a call because she had an idea. She wanted me to create a collage using vintage elements, but with her own slogan. I had to act fast, though, because she just got this great idea and she wanted to post it on her website that day. It was right after New Year's, and we were due to leave for Milwaukee in 45 minutes to see friends. So in the process of telling her I probably wouldn't be able to get it done, Brian goes, "Well, I'll bet you could crank it out in 45 minutes. Why don't you give it a shot?" So I did. And I'm very happy I did because she loved it. And the very next day, she called and asked me if I would like to create collages of people's homes for her website. Oh, and I would get paid to do it. So on the basis of that gig alone, I put in my 2 weeks' notice at the newspaper, and I began what is now my current career as a full-time artist making mini art of people's homes. I was elated, I was ecstatic, and I was panic-stricken. I had just quit my full-time job, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I just took a ridiculous risk, and I had no plan for how I was going to make up the money I just left behind in my job. So to supplement my income at first, I started saving. A lot. Coupons, cooking from scratch, foregoing those daily coffees and those magazines. I got pretty good at it. And as if the stars aligned, there were all of these new art groups being formed right here in Fond du Lac, and also a monthly gallery walk. All of a sudden, I'm surrounded by art opportunities, and I felt like this was the universe telling me that I did the right thing and that everything was going to be okay. Another thing I started doing, I said yes to everything. Any show, event, call for arts, any chance I had to show my work or teach, I took it. And I realized that one of the secrets that would happen to me for my success would be to just show up, honestly, and just be in a bunch of places where I thought it would do me some good. Sometimes these things worked, and sometimes they didn't, but I just kept plugging away. Thankfully, I knew instinctively early on that I had a lot to learn about this art practice. So I asked a lot of questions, took a lot of workshops. It helped tremendously. And one of the things I said yes to doing was attending a critique. I had never been to a real one before because I had never been to art school. So if you don't know what a critique is, it's where you take a piece or two of your artwork to a school or a gallery and have an established artist give their honest opinion. Because I had never been to a critique before, I didn't know what to expect. But what I got was, in hindsight, probably not too surprising. The biggest point I took away from that critique was, maybe you could work larger? So we've all heard the cliches, right? Go big or go home. Bigger is better. We tend to value large things in our culture. I mean, these letters are as tall as I am. And to be honest, from a gallerist's standpoint, it really does make sense. I mean, I was working 4-inch little minis, and a piece like that up against a piece on a gallery wall that's 2 feet square, well, my pieces would get lost. So after a short bout, year maybe, of self-doubt and fear, I took that advice to heart and I started working large. And wouldn't you know it, those pieces actually made it into juried shows, which means that they were accepted into the shows. It was amazing to see my work in galleries I never thought I would be able to exhibit in. And honestly, it did give me a much needed boost of confidence. But after a while, something didn't feel right. I realized I just don't enjoy working large. I like putting a lot of tiny little details into my work, and for me, that is just so much easier when I work small. I was also starting at this point to work on printmaking rather than paintings or collage, and with prints you can make multiples. And that got me thinking, what if I started working in series rather than just random samples of what I can do? When you work in a series, you're actually creating a collection of pieces that are very similar. Because my work is so small, my series consists of 30 or 50 or even 200 pieces, which is exactly what I'm working on right now in dry point. Dry point is a printmaking technique where you take a durable surface like plexiglass, shown here, or copper, and you take very, very sharp tools and make marks in them. Some people say etching, but that's not correct. I fell in love with dry point a couple years ago when I took a class. And when this very venue that we're sitting in right now actually asked me to do a solo exhibit next March, I knew immediately that I wanted to do a collection, a very large collection of tiny dry points. This is where the 200 pieces comes in. I am currently making a dry point print a day for 200 days. I am insane. And I'm actually still in the middle of it. Today is day number 145. So I still have 55 days to go. Lord help me. I love these pieces. They're each only 1.5 by 2 inches. And I will be turning 50 soon, so I definitely have to wear magnifying glasses when I work. I am styling, by the way. But I have to tell you, I have not been in the zone with my artwork like this since the early days of those ATCs. Once again, my creating of these is pure joy. And when I work on them, I've got my jazz going on in the background, and nothing else matters in that moment. It is pure joy. I love it. So that's the end of that. But I do have one more tiny art story for you, and it's a good one. It's so good. It may even be my favorite. Doesn't start off so great, though. In 2011, my youngest niece was diagnosed with Stargardt's disease. It's a retinal disease, which is essentially juvenile macular degeneration. She went from having near normal vision to almost no vision in a very short period of time. As you can imagine, this was an extremely difficult time for my sister and her whole family. And as her aunt, I felt utterly helpless. When the initial shock wore off, I started subscribing to some regional and national newsletters about Stargardt's and funding into this disease, and it gave me an idea. What if I created super tiny art to give people an idea of what it's like to live with Stargardt's? So I created a prototype piece that's only a 1/4 inch square. There. That's the size right there. To those of you in the back of the room, this probably looks like a speck of dirt, right? This was exactly my point. I also knew that there's no way I could do this alone, so I recruited 12 of my art friends to help me along this journey, and my sister even made a piece too, which was very special. What I got in return blew me away. Every piece in this video, right, or in this slide right here, is a 1/4 inch square. And how lovely that my friends helped me do this. We held the exhibit of these pieces, I believe we had 30 pieces total, at my friend Julie Balson's place of business. She was so kind to have us there. And the turnout for the reception was phenomenal. But the best part is the 14 of us managed to raise over $1,000 for Foundation Fighting Blindness. It wasn't just me, it was an absolute communal effort. After this experience, I realized how my art career was different than any I had ever had at this point. And probably I'll never have another one, so this is it. I could use my art to raise money for causes I cared about. I could use my money to protest, which is important to me. I can use it to teach, which is very important to me. And I am also the volunteer curator at our gallery in our local library, which is also very important to me. Because of my position there, I am able to round up all of my art friends and have them in exhibits where they can share their own work with everyone else. It's all about the sharing, guys. And I feel very strongly that we artists have to stick together and we have to support one another. Remember back when I said I love not having to think about my job at the end of the day? Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. I think about my job all the time, but I'm having such a wonderful time, it doesn't matter. And because of all of these reasons and so many more, my job satisfaction, I'm very happy to report, is even greater than 88%. In the movie adaptation, there's a line by author Susan Orlean that perfectly describes my love of the tiny and its relationship to my art career. To care passionately about something is to whittle the world down to a more manageable size. For me, working small is so fulfilling, it is far more than enough. Thank you.